So we'll have a quick look back at what happened in the last almost year and a half now. And then we'll have a quick look at what we still need to do to get to 1.0, and obviously where do we go after that. So where do we come from? This is one of the first things that we came up with in early 2020. Just over a year ago. These are the first screenshots that I found in one of the monthlies of the new Hub GUI. This is right after we started to. Actually, this was at a point where Spoon was still a thing, and this was, I think, an experiment that Matt wrote just to see where that would get us. And I think that's pretty obvious where we are now. But this is just over a year ago. And in March, the old UI, so Spoon, was dropped from the code base. We had the renaming of jobs and transformations to workflows and pipelines. The translator was revived. I think cleanup is what we mainly what we did for about a year and a half. That is about the time where we went from about 2 gigabytes to less than 200 at that time, where we dropped the pop-up dialog that you had when starting Spoon. That took 2 minutes in some cases. And at that time, just 1 or 2 seconds.
Yeah.
We were doing, I think that's one of the things that we mentioned at KCM 19 already, that we dropped the pop-up dialog. And next to cleanup, I think we all spent hours, days, weeks doing nothing but porting plugins. The translator was one of the first things that we revived. The start of documentation as code was a thing back then. And then in May, we had our first preview release, well, we had a first 0.10, but I think the 0.20 was intended to be the first preview release that we would bring out in the open, and that turned out to be a 0.21 because there was a blocking issue that prevented us from releasing. We introduced environments and unit testing them. Those were 2 external plugins for Kettle that were integrated into Hop, and the unification of all of the tools, the consistent branding, if you wish, of all of the tools, all of the kitchen related terms, cuisine related terms were dropped in favor of the more consistent Hub GUI, run server, translator, and conf, and there have been a couple of additional ones. Search was introduced this week or last week. Yeah, and there will be a couple of more, but this is all in the process of making things more intuitive, more consistent, and that is almost a year ago as well. And well, the environment, yeah, we didn't have any projects yet. The discussions that the lengthy and vivid discussions that we had in the chat about projects and environments and purposes all came after that. Apparently, I didn't remember that it was that recent. And then in May and June, Beam started. We started working on WebHub. It was still called WebHub then. I think that was the only exception. Everything else was called Hub this or that. And then there was WebHub, which came from WebSpoon. We started working on Docker support, Hub Ultimate import tool, I think was the name, was the first attempt at importing jobs and transformations, so Pentaho projects into Hop. Then in June, we started working on projects, environments, purposes. VFS was ported. We had the first file dialog. If you look back at it now, it's pretty empty compared to all the additional functionality that has been added. Search perspective, transform previews, the screenshot in the up lower right corner was added in June. And then we found out that the Metastore had a licensing issue. Everything in Hop, Project Hop at the time, was Apache licensed. We were preparing the incubation or thinking about making an incubation proposal at the time, and the Metastore was LGPL, so had an inconsistent license, and that was rewritten to Hop metadata. And that is actually, it's more or less in the background from a user perspective, that was a very significant change. Then over the summer, we started working on, like, I think we did quite a lot of work on the Apache proposal. In the meantime, we worked on metadata injection. By that time, almost all of the major job entries were ported to actions, transformation steps were ported to transform. So I think we had about 200, close to 200 plugins that were ported from Pentaho to Hop at that time. And in October, late September or October, Project Hop at the time joined the ASF. So the proposal was accepted, and we were rebranded from Project Hop to Apache Hop at that time. And in the meantime, the UI kept evolving. We had the categories in the context dialog. I think the search was extended. A couple of layout changes there. In the lower right corner, the new edit manage in, I think it was the database dialogs where we had it first, and then that little menu started showing up everywhere. I think that's one of the things that Nicholas did, one of the many things that Nicholas did. But well, yeah, in that time, the incubation was, of course, the most important change that we went through. Yeah, well, and then the ASF, I think it's fair to say that we've been pretty busy for a couple of weeks, months to port all of the code, all of the infrastructure, all of the builds to the ASF, to the Apache Software Foundation. In the meantime, another couple of plugins, so CPython, MongoDB, I think 6 or something like that, Salesforce plugins, a lot of documentation, and the Hop GUI started to take the shape that it more or less has today. So the icons for pipelines, workflows, JavaScript, the entire metadata perspective are areas where, again, Nicola did an awful lot of work. And in the meantime, we started preparing for the 0.50 release. That didn't see the light of day. That was our first release in the Apache Software Foundation. And the whole incubation process in the ASF is, well, is based on two pillars. One is community building. And the second one is having all of our software all of the dependencies, all of the licenses that are used have to work the Apache way. Its releases in the Apache Software Foundation are a legal process rather than a technical process, and we found that the hard way. So 0.50, I think, went through 2 release candidates, and by the time we were ready to fix all of the issues we had in 0.50, the hop software had evolved so much that it didn't make sense to stick with 0.50, and we skipped to 0.60. And in the meantime, we worked on the single-click UI that speeds up development significantly. And like I said, the icons and metadata perspective were added. And then we're at the changes that started early this year. A couple of well, smaller things like export to SVG that are important. The integration tests were added. Again, that is something that you don't see as a hop user, but it is a very important tool to have. The integration tests are part of the build, run once per day, and use workflows and pipelines to test the functionality in transforms, actions, and the combinations of them against, I think we have 5-6 containers running in a Docker Compose, and these builds run on a daily basis, check that we don't have regressions, that everything works as expected. And in the first weeks after these integration tests were well enabled, I think we identified and fixed a couple of bugs that must have been in the Kettle code base for a decade, maybe even more.
A simple stuff like add sequence, if you run it in parallel, for example, doesn't give you back unique values. So it's like, how is that possible, right? That was the first. It starts with the A, right? So the first integration test I added, because I was getting some weird results during a POC for Home Depot, and it was like, let me just do an integration test for that. I write a unit test, and it was like, yeah, I'm not getting unique values. Simple, right? You generate 1 million IDs in parallel, and I only got like 800,000 unique values or something like that. And so that gets run now every night. Whenever somebody changes anything to that transform, it will stay fixed this way. I know Leandro did a lot of work on the Markito stuff in the code, but those are the sorts of things that are hard to detect and typically also take a lot of time. I think running these integration tests takes over an hour and a half against Mongo and Cassandra and Postgres, and it's like Bart said, it's involved. But it is a cornerstone if we want to keep our versions compatible in the future. It cannot be a guessing game. We have to really force. We have to run actual workflows and pipelines, like Bart said. Anyway, go on.
I think the partition stream lookup is another one that is not very visible, but enables you to run hop on huge amounts of data. I think that is one feature that Matt developed, and I think he tested it on a machine that had over 1 terabyte of data, or at least over 100 gigabytes of data, tens of cores, and
4 terabyte of memory, 160 cores.
Yeah, well,
we maxed it out.
Yeah. So pretty cool one as well. And early this year, we had some significant updates to Docker, to Kubernetes. I think at that point we integrated Docker, the Docker file, Docker build in the default hop build. And Yandex again is a code level change. Yandex lets us or allows us to identify and scan all of the plugins on code annotations instead of the XML configuration files that we still had at that time. And that significantly simplifies the code. And I think that has been one of the recurring tasks that we have been working on, and Matt has obviously spent a lot of time on simplifying and simplifying and cleaning up the code has taken a lot of time, a lot of effort, but has improved the speed at which we can develop in Hop significantly, dramatically.
Yeah,
So
this
that's
this was done by Nicola.
again, yeah.
Again, he's also been my let's say it my agent. See that you know that everything stays clean in the code. It's been a tremendous help. You know, merci beaucoup.
And yeah, then late January, we had our first release. So after 0.50, 0.60 was the first release that that actually passed. And to avoid taking all of the ASF hurdles at the same time, 0.60 was a source-only release. We are a couple of days, maybe a week away, hopefully, from having a 0.70 release. And that will be the first release with binaries. So that will make Hop a lot more accessible for non-developers, basically. You don't have to download nightly builds anymore. You can just download a release build once that is done. And also in February, the plugins just keep coming. We had password AS400 again, Nico. JSON enhanced JSON plugin that was contributed by Sergio. Metadata structure, translation improvements, the kettle importer that lets you import kettle Pentaho projects into Hop. Dark mode, as if I remember correctly, that was not really something that was discussed a lot. But as soon as it became a topic, everyone switched almost overnight to dark mode. And then we have pipeline probes, pipeline and workflow logging, which are three important new metadata types that allow you to send logging information for the running pipeline and workflow to a pipeline, basically. There's and probes do the same for data, so you can catch logging and actual data for your pipelines and workflows and process them in a pipeline. So from there on, you can do whatever you want, and that opens not just for logging, that opens a couple of opportunities, but especially for the pipeline probes that allows you to do lineage, auditing, profiling, you name it. And another metadata type that was added is a web service, where you can access pipelines as web or over web services. And then, well, the March update was published today. A couple of really big ones there. We now have Neo4j as a first-class citizen in Hop. The Neo4j plugins were already available from Matt's personal GitHub repository, and basically all it took was download and zip into your Hop installation folder. But that takes that takes two additional steps. You have to know that these plugins exist. You have to do the action of downloading and installing, and having those plugins as well directly available in Hop is a major step forward. And I think there are there definitely are over 10 additional plugins. I think 6 transforms to write to Neo4j graphs, to read or execute Cypher queries, a new perspective for execution logging in Neo4j. So this is a very rich set of functionality that was added. Another perspective that was added is the file explorer, of which the upper 2 screenshots on the right-hand side are. And that file explorer lets you not only have an overview of the files in your project. You have the color-coded indication of the Git status. So red files are not in Git. There are indications of changed, of ignored files, and so on. And there is a visual diff that is the middle screenshot where you have the yellow and green icons to indicate which of the transforms in your pipeline have been added, modified, deleted, and so on. So this is another very rich set of functionality that will make it a lot easier to do more of your work all within the Hop GUI. And AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud are now have support in VFS, so you can access your files in S3 buckets in Google Storage, Google Drive, Azure, Blob Storage, just through a URL. We have 20 new transforms. The list is there: Neo4j, Cassandra, Google Analytics, Google Sheets. That was contributed by Jean-Francois Montet, Splunk MQTT by Sergio again. And for April, we have been going through the steps required to get 0.70 released. We have the first round of votes, so we're making progress there. And finally, great communities make great software. I mentioned that one of the cornerstones of the Apache incubation process is building community. We've seen quite an impressive growth in the number of people on the chat, people that follow us, follow Hop on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on YouTube, even though there's not that much there. We're getting close to 100 subscribers. But we'd like to take a minute to do a shout out to a couple of community members who have been really active. We mentioned Nicola a couple of times. He's done an awful lot of work. He's done an awful lot of work. Hiromu developed the original WebSpoon and has done a lot of work to port that code to help web. And actually, he's been the driving force behind Hop Web with the help of Matt. But that's that's where Hiromu has put in a lot of effort. Brandon created a first video, has made a couple of other contributions. Mahendran has been working on Kubernetes, couple of plugins, has done a lot of code cleanup, etc. And Sergio has created a couple of plugins, has done code cleanup, did a lot of work on the
Italian translation.
Yeah, exactly. Italian translations, the translator itself in the last couple of weeks and in general. So thanks to the 5 of you, absolutely. But anyway, thanks to everyone who has been involved in Hop, in just following Hop, testing Hop, asking questions. Any involvement with Hop is great help, and it's incredibly important for the success and the progress that we've been making. All of the feedback, all of the input that you make is incredibly appreciated. And that's as far as the presentation goes. So yeah, that's the quick look back that well, the road that is behind us. And I think it's now time to talk about what we are ready to do for what we still need to do for 1.0, and have a look at what we can do after 1.0. So yeah, in general, feel free to shout out what your expectations are. But
So yeah, just to look back a little bit, you can see that development speed has picked up tremendously since we've migrated everything over to the Apache Software Foundation infrastructure work that Hans did. Who's always very quiet in these meetings, but he has been really going out on the limb. Um, getting these integration tests to run on Docker Compose, on the various infrastructure blocks that we have at our disposal, getting the builds to run continuously. It was a tremendous work, and now we see that once we have all these hurdles out of the way, that yeah, things are so easy to develop for actually. So it's so much fun to build new features. The code is really squeaky clean now. It's like if you want to add a new icon, it's just one method with one annotation, and you say which icon, and all of a sudden there's the button, right?
no.
So we're now at a phase where yeah, your feedback is just not just welcome. It's easy to innovate again. It's easy to move forward, and um, you know, it's like I think it was Willy Wonka that said, "We are the dreamer of dreams." Right? We can decide how this thing looks, and yeah. So far, we've been looking at our own little group, and obviously a couple of decades of experience about how we want tools to work and how we don't want tools to work. Um, I've been showing things like hop search earlier. So this comes from my own pain of working with Kettle in some scenario on a server where I said, well, somebody hard coded some host name somewhere, and I don't know where. It must be in one of these 500 transforms here, transformations, right? Then you resort to something like find grep minus L whatever, and then open VIs, and now you have hop search that says find all, search all workflows, transforms, all the configuration files, and find me the hard coded host name or the IP address, and it will say this is the file that has that. And it's great to have it in the GUI, but it's actually in these scenarios where you're over on a secure shell to a server on the other side of the world. That's where you need it, right? So those are the sorts of feedback that we want from you. It's like, yeah, I've had this scenario, and and this is the way that we looked at lifecycle management. Uh, And yeah, I think Ken can attest to that. We've talked about lifecycle management in Kettle for the whole time that I was at Pentao, 12 years. We talked about it. Never got anything done. And then with the help of DTART and other people said, yeah, no, I want it like this. I want to be able to check in my config files for dev, prod, test into Git as well in a separate repository locally. I want to version that information. I want to have this scenario cover this scenario, and all of a sudden, like Bart said, it evolved. We just changed and said, well, we're not 1.0 yet. We can still change. We can make it rock solid. But now we're actually wanting to do a 1.0 because we see a lot of people lurking in the shadows saying like, oh, let's wait a little bit more until they have a 1.0 release. And we can't continue to just pile on features. We want to have a 1.0. So we do 0.70 while the release candidates that we cut out for the Apache Software Foundation for the IPMC for everybody to test has been approved. Is that right, Hans? I think we have the number of votes. And so then we have to wait for, I think, 72 hours. I think that's tomorrow or Saturday.
Yes, so we have the votes, but unless so at this moment, in a normal context, having enough votes is enough. But in our current situation, because we're still an incubator, there can still be, there's a couple of people that possibly could give like a veto -1, but I don't expect that because our previous release went pretty smoothly too. So the voting ends tomorrow evening. And this weekend I'll create the binaries and prepare them for download and stuff like that. So unless someone votes against us, Monday we will have a 0.70 release.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, you've heard us talk a lot about these licensing issues. We found a lot of conflicting libraries in Kettle, a lot of GPL, LGPL violations when you go with a fine comb through a code base that is 20 years old. You can't imagine what kind of shit you turn up, right? But yeah, it's been a good thing for us. So even if we do have a minus vote, it will just shift everything back a week or so. But the next releases will always be a lot easier to do at that point because, yeah, we've basically inventorized everything that is in Hop, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this has been quite the adventure. I think yeah, the invitation is clear. What do we still want for 1.0? Nothing. This is a great 1.0 in my opinion. We've Bart did a few migrations from Kettle projects. I did a few. There were some glaring holes in the offering in Hop, like the ability to log to a relational database. And we said, well, let's not repeat that same functionality. Let's log in a general sense. So now you can log to a relational database, but also send a logging to Stackdriver or S3 or wherever you want, right? So I think it's a better solution in general. So every time that we find these opportunities to improve on the team, we'll continue to take it. So that is something that you can test, you can try out. Download 0.70 over the weekend. Also start to test Hop Web. Hiromo has been fixing bugs left and right. I have been trying to do the same, and it's starting to look really, really great. We run off the exact same code base for both Linux, Windows, OS X, and RCP. So I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Hiromu. You have any glaring holes right now? Maybe
Yeah,
the
so
clipboard?
thanks for you and Hans and everyone. This Hop Web is taking good shape. It's continuously built in the Jenkins Apache server. And I have a just quick question. Is this Docker for Hop Web is now hosted somewhere, Docker Hub or publicly available? Those nightly build?
Yeah, it's built continuously. So the Docker container is called incubator-hop-web. And
Nice.
so the version right now is 0.99 snapshot. So you'll see it listed on Docker Hub. And you can just do a pull of that and run it. And then you have the latest on port 8080, right? So it's just the one-liners to get it started. And this makes it easy for us to test and makes it easy for you to test. So those things help.
Yeah, just bear with me. I am slow recently to fixing those bugs, but I am making progress one by one.
Yeah, and I've been you know, squashing some bugs there as well. So you're not alone. You know, just this is something that there's some very obvious things that that are still need to be fixed, but once they're fixed, they're done. And Hans wrote a developer guideline to avoid making the same mistakes, and we look out for it doing the code reviews when we do the pull request validation. So no, it's looking really great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the major hurdles that we need to take for 1.0 now are not that much development related. We are hardening a lot of things. We're working on a full set of integration tests, of extended samples, documentation. So we want to build the make the whole package a bit more robust and a bit more complete. But functionality-wise, I think we're pretty close to what a 1.0 will be.
Yeah, and I also want to emphasize that we're never going to be completely finished, right? So, for example, in the file explorer, the Explorer perspective, you have the ability to view like JSON files, and you can even change them, save. But for example, XML files are read-only right now, for example, right? So there is still, architecturally, we're in a great spot, but I assume that a lot of functionality is going to come in 1.1 maybe, 1.2, whatever, right? There's plenty of versions. There's nothing like, yeah, there's always going to be things that are missing. And if you find anything that you need, just file a Jira case and we'll get to it as soon as possible. Yeah. Yeah. Any specific questions on Hop, the GUI? Maybe I can just show stuff.
I have one quick question about how to file a ticket. So when you are a user and testing this the binary build, when I find a bug, how do I file a ticket on Apache Jira? And how do I like a label like P0, P1, or major, minor? Do you have any? Do we have any guidelines to do that?
Yeah, let me just share my screen. The Hop website has been it's been overhauled a little bit, but the tools are a great starting point to see where is the code on GitHub, where are bugs reported. Jenkins, for example, you know, the Artifactory. There's a lot of stuff, right? The Jenkins website. So if you want to know about, for example, the latest test results for integration tests, you can see the test against Cassandra and all the stuff that we run. So we have a very open kind of approach to that. And specifically for Jira, creating tickets. Yeah, it's the standard Apache. It's issues.apache.org. The project name is HOP. And so if you create an issue, just make sure that you specify the Apache hop. And yeah, select bug or feature or improvement. And then you can just yeah, follow some. You can specify your own component, but you can pick the one that we. Any bug report is great. We don't really care about duplicates. Just tell us what you want, right? Does that make sense? More
So
bugs are good.
yeah, if you keep that dialogue again, you can see those like a parity. That if you can open the create bug dialog once
Sure.
more, yeah, and at the lower part you can see like a fixed version and parity and labels.
Yes.
It doesn't really matter at this moment, or are we supposed to put like a major bug or minority bug or P0, P1, P2?
Yeah, you can do this. We will fill in. You can just leave it blank if you file a bug, but if you do file a bug report, you get different issues. We do appreciate if you could specify which version it is. So from Saturday, you'll probably pick 0.70. Or you can also pick 0.99, which will be the latest build that we'll have. And we call it 0.99 because we have an intention of cutting that as a 1.0 as soon as humanly possible. And so there are a bunch of things that we put in Jira as blockers. So for example, a big one that we can always use a little bit of help is make our documentation feature complete. And we have quite a list of things that we went through on our own website. And so there are some glaring, obvious missing things that we want to document and put out there for 1.0. Yeah, because because we don't want you to get stuck if you start using Hop, right?
Yeah.
It's a list, but it's not 5 months of work, right? It's a couple of weeks of documentation work. But if you can help with that, if anybody is interested, just go to the Hop website, jump on our MetaMost server, and yeah, join us. You can also join the developer mailing list. That's also part of the community website mailing list. I don't know. That seems to be not be working. But we have a few mailing lists that are on Jira. I don't know. That's something for Barter Hands to look at. They've been working on overhauling the whole user manual documentation. But yeah, in general, I think we're in a great place. If we do find really critical bugs in Hop, we'll obviously not be going to a 1.0. We will take a little bit longer. But yeah. So the Hop Web cases, just flag them under Hop Web. I have added a few, which will get resolved in the next couple of days. For Hop Web, take the latest snapshot from the downloads. If you go to download, take a 0.99 snapshot here and just grab one of the latest builds, and those will have the latest functionality. For Hop Web, usually it's small APIs that are not available in a web context that we need to catch, but it's very small. Yeah, it's just one-liners of code basically that we have to sprinkle here and there to make it behave correctly. Incidentally, our file dialog, file open, for example, was created for usage in Hop Web because yeah, on the web we don't have another way of opening. We don't have a native file dialog, so we had to create one. But this is working really great. So now we can actually open text files you know, on S3 or on Google Code, and it will open it up in a file explorer perspective. So it's really nicely integrated right now. I think you'll enjoy working like that. So this file explorer with Git integration, and that Git integration incidentally is also code from Hiromu Hoda. So for Hiromu, is also the creator of the Git plugin, right? Git Spoon, I think it was called.
Originally, yes.
Yeah. So
it's now looks nicer on Hope GUI. Thanks to you.
The thing that we did was automatically detect that the project is part of it has a .git config folder in here, so you don't need to configure it. It already knows. The API was simple enough. So if you go then to a file, then you can have the difference in text file format, so the text diff or the visual diff, right? So it's quite easy. It's similar to what we had before. I think I've added support for the hops in a similar way that you did it, Hiromu. And yeah, we've been having people on the chat saying they want other ways of comparing, visually comparing these things. But for now, it works really well. It gives you, in any case, a great insight into what's going on with a particular file. Yeah. And again, the reason for integrating the File Explorer Git is the use case of running Hop Web in a Docker container. It takes 6 seconds or something like that to start a Hop Web Docker container. So it makes a great use case for just saying, hey, I'm a developer. I need a container with Hop Web in the cloud. I just run it, and 6 seconds later, I can start developing. It would be great if you then have your Git clone projects in there, and yeah, it's harder to drop down to a command line or to do these things. So it's I think it's useful to be able to use this sort of stuff, or to say like, hey, you know, this you just close this one for now. This one I want to add it to Git, and then simply do a Git commit. This one, and just have a commit map as your test pipeline, whatever. Right? And so that sort of stuff already works. There's more code in Hiromu's code base in that plugin for a fork, for branching, for stash, unstash, those sorts of things, and they will come in the near future. But it's functional for now. For those simple cases, it's more than enough. Yeah.
Okay.
Just jump back.
Yep. What I noticed at the start of the question, because we diverted a bit away from there, but the question was about the Jira tickets. Would it help to create maybe a half-pager with a couple of guidelines of what are the important criteria to look at, what you definitely need to fill in, and simple or basic things like that, but a couple of checkpoints to know what you need to pay attention to when creating a ticket?
Yeah. I think we have a similar thing for pull requests as well.
And I think that is very valuable input in general. If there are things that we can make easier, that we can add more detail to the documentation, anything that you can think of to to make it easier for you to provide feedback or request features or whatever, let us know.
Okay, and this is Landy from Mexico. So, what about the Spanish translations? We can help with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we can see there is a tool for translation. Can you give us some clarification how is the process is? I can see you can start with the GUI, translating some strings, but how after we send this translation to you?
Sorry, I didn't really get. Okay.
I didn't get to. There are two possible ways. The first way would be if, as you are checking out the source code to do the translations, you can create a pull request to our repository. It's a public repository, so you can create a pull request, and we'll evaluate. We won't do much evaluation on the translations itself because, well, I don't speak Spanish. And then we merge your translations into the code, and they will automatically be included in the software. If another possible way, if this was easier in your process, would be to add them as an attachment to a Jira ticket, and then we will include them in the code. So both ways are possible. You can pick what you prefer. And I would also like to go to Hiromo. When 0.70 is released, we will add more links to the download page to the Docker repositories as well, because from the foundation itself, we are technically not allowed to promote snapshot builds. And we do not have an official release there, so that's why there are no links publicly available. But they will show up after this weekend probably.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, for handset, there is an instructions page on hop internationalization. So it's on the documentation, developer documentation, and then internationalization. And so internationalization also links to a page on how to set up your development environment, how to fork Apache Hop, how to clone it, import into IntelliJ in this case, but it's similar for Eclipse. We use Google Java format for uniform Java formatting, and that is done on the server as well before the pull requests go in. A bit on the copyright headers that we want all over the place. That was a little bit of a pain. And how to run, debug, commit, update forks. And then for internationalization, I guess generating a pull request, all the other stuff. Yeah, you can update your forks, but usually what you do is just generate a pull request for, hey, I have that would be ES, I don't know what the country code for Mexico was, MX or something. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it's the same probably. It's not like PTBR, right? It's just Spanish. And so yeah, I mean, so there are some tips and tricks. I think Sergio would love to help you out. He's been he's been fixing stuff in Translator because he's been using it to translate most of the GUI in Italian because he has customers that are using it in Italian, and he wants to be ready for those people. And he thought that the original translation of Pebble was horribly bad. So so using Translator, this is how you do it. It's pretty simple, and it will save the message bundles in UTF-8. There's very little way of making a mistake there. It will show you those packages that are not translated in a sort of color code. And so yeah, that's pretty much how you do that. We try to make it as convenient as possible. But yeah.
Yes, we can start with
Yeah.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Matt.
Okay.
And I think we can improve the documentation a little to point to pull request information for internationalization as
Yeah.
well. There's also an I18N channel in Mattermost. So if you have any questions, feel free to join the chat and start a discussion there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, will do.
So yeah, that's pretty much. So what do you want for 1.0? That yeah, you pretty much heard it. We could use a few more samples as well. So if you are interested in building samples, maybe I can show you that as well. Yeah, sorry to jump back and forth. So if you're interested in building samples that go into 1.0, we don't need like a gazillion examples, but if you download Hop right now, you will see, for example, that there are samples for Beam, right? And the way that that is done is by having a samples folder, like we have a doc folder, Java resources, there's a samples folder, and this gets incorporated into the samples project in Hop. And the way that is done is there's like a config folder here, projects, samples, and this is where that this ends up. So this folder Beam comes from the plugin Beam, and this allows us to be completely modular. So if you have a certain transform for which you want to create, I don't know, a sample, add sequence, just one of the first. So there's a sample, add a cyclic number, add a unique ID. So those get then copied over to transforms over here. So yeah, but we do need more than just a couple, right? This was not a random selection on my part. But if you want to, yeah, you can just add these pipelines and workflows for the actions, and they will automatically get added to the samples project. So that's very easy to do. Just generate a pull request for adding these samples. And yeah, that's easy enough to do, but it's a lot of work for us. Keep the samples quite simple. Oops, sorry. Keep them simple and straightforward. And yeah, at some point we might want to have some documentation to go with those as well. Maybe in that documentation, link to the sample or describe them a little bit. That would be an easy way of doing that, right? So we can use all the help we can get with those kinds of things. And for the integration tests, the same thing. They are stored under integration tests. Imagine that. So if you have a specific test for, like the copies for add sequence or stuff like that, you just look at the other. There's like a job that gets executed for each and every integration test. Quite simple. You have access to every transform and action that is available in the Docker container, the integration test Docker container, which means it's the complete build that you have access to. But obviously, the idea is to test the functionality of a particular transform or action. And yeah, then you can run tests on the logging output, or count the number of distinct values, write to a file in a temp file, read it back, see if this adheres to what you want. It is possible to create a golden data set for unit tests, and so add these unit tests. For example, in the case of integration test transforms, this is a project that I set up in this folder in my source code. And then quite easily I can say, okay, so how do we test the add sequence transform? First I run, count the number of IDs. Basically, I concatenate them, see if it's the same as a certain value that I expect, and otherwise I abort. And so if this workflow fails, this will get picked up and reported on Jenkins. Same for this one. So this runs in 10 copies, and then counts distinct, and quite simple but quite effective apparently. There have been a couple of surprises already, like Bart said. Field splitter, when I added a specific feature to the field splitter to have an escape string. So then you say, okay, I want to split on an escape string. So yeah, you can easily verify functionality by saying, okay, I have a couple of things that I want to try, and simple but effective testing. So the more that you can come up with, the better. Obviously, right now we've been focusing on the pain points that we've had with Kettle in general, which were parameters and variables. Parameters and variables were like, okay, between versions, I could set a variable or a parameter, but it wasn't set, or it behaved slightly different. There were like implied but unclear rules for doing that. And so with these integration tests, we're tying it all down, right? Same for the workflow executor, pipeline executor for looping. So any help you can give us building more tests, just help us out. Yeah, that would be very welcome. Yeah. But it's helped us. These integration tests are just fantastic. If something is wrong anywhere, even though we only have like, I don't know, 40 something tests, they're like whole workflows, and there's a lot of stuff that gets executed. And so if anything feels off, it will fail, right? Yeah. So yeah.
And I would like to add again, if creating those pull requests is a bridge too far, we're happy with Jira tickets where you attach your samples to. I mean,
Yeah.
If that is something you say, well, that's a bridge, that's too much of new stuff for me, just send them our way in any way possible, and we'll add them to the code base.
Same with code or plugins that you port or something. We'll be happy to help. We've done hundreds.
Yeah, that's just
400
stuff that shouldn't get in the way. And we may be assuming that things are we may assume that things are easier than they are. We are pretty used to working in code, creating pull requests, filing bug tickets. So we may assume a couple of things that aren't that obvious to all of you. So any feedback that you have in any area that we can improve in is very, very much appreciated. Whether that is in chat or direct messages, mailing lists, Twitter, you name it. Any feedback is welcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But in general, the more that we test, the more that we push this forward, the better the 1.0 is going to be. I feel great about Hop the way it is. I've done, like you guys said, I've done some really heavy lifting for my work at Neo4j. Really like processing hundreds of gigabytes of data in let's say a very short amount of time. On 160 cores. At some point, I was processing data at hundreds of megabytes a second. So yeah, that was tremendous. All running off of SSDs and stuff like that. And so yeah, I did find bugs, like I said, the add sequence bug. But I also implemented things like parallel partitioning. I've been running a lot of stuff lately on Spark and Google Cloud Dataflow, testing on those platforms. So make sure to try that out if you're interested in those kind of things. It's actually pretty cool to be able to do that. And yeah, just so give it a run for its money. It's free after all.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
Bart, you mentioned earlier, probably during the language translation portion, that there were customers using this.
Well, yeah. So yeah, we've been doing POCs left and right, but yeah. So we're comfortable in supporting Hop right now already. So there's no problem there.
Cool. Impressive.
Yeah.
So just to join the conversation, I don't know. There's like 20
so the thing is, right? I feel more comfortable supporting Hop than Kettle, because if there's any bug in Kettle, I can't fix it. I can't. It's impossible to do anything there. Right?
Yeah.
But it's like a weird situation. I've been dying to get that 0.70 out there, so that it's like, yeah. But I've been even more dying to get a 1.0 out, because yeah, then it's like but even a 1.0, yeah, you need something supportive in the background, right? And
so you all know Mark Hall.
Yeah.
And before I got sidetracked with another project, Mark and I were playing with Hop, and he had ported the old PMI to Hop.
Yeah.
And I had experimented with that in December, and once you get it integrated into Hop, at least this was an old version, right? Whatever was released in December. My machine learning models from the previous platform all worked.
Yeah.
It's great. But, PMI itself is a very large system of plugins and Python and scikit-learn and so forth. So that all has to come up. I don't think when you compile the whole thing into a block, it brought that entire environment with it. But it's at least locally.
Yeah.
Learning works in Hop.
So the thing that I've been wrestling with in the last month or so, maybe I can show you guys this just 2 minutes, right? Is that with Hop we now have like a metadata architecture, right? So if you look at things like Cassandra, for example, so this was the last thing that I did. So Cassandra now is like a metadata connect. So if I have a Cassandra running in a Docker container, this is now a metadata type. So the Cassandra connection, which was previously, this information was copied in every step, in every Cassandra step all over the place. But it makes it very tedious to add new things like Cassandra execute CQL, which I wrote in like 5 minutes time. Because once you take out that Cassandra metadata, this is the same view, but then non-floating. But the same I did for Splunk, the same for Mongo, and so on. But you can do the same thing for models, for example, right? So it's a very simple way of making a lot of these parameters or whatever reusable without having to do any of your own coding, because this is all driven from one class, basically. The GUI is generated automatically. There's a lot of stuff that's already very easy to use under the cover. So I think it makes sense to just have a session with Mark and see, hey, how can we integrate better in Hop, how we can make it even cooler, right? You know what I mean? Yeah.
I think that's a process that we've seen with a lot of the plugins that we have, and well, especially the plugins that have been ported from Kettle. In a first phase, we just import or port to hub what exists and then start to optimize. And I think we spent more time optimizing than the pure porting part now.
Yeah.
And that's maybe something we need to look at with Mark to optimize well the machine MI plugins in Hop.
Yeah, I'm not speaking for Mark. I was just giving Mark kudos that it was very easy.
Yeah.
The version we had is ported over. I've used it. I just, like I said, I was busy, but I had fired it back up again on my other laptop and was starting to play with it again before this meeting. So I'm looking forward to.
He's quite amazing. We would love to include the CPython transform. I don't know if there are licensing issues, but I don't think there were any for the CPython.
Yeah, it's a funny little world between the two. So depending on how you name it, one's available, one's not.
Yeah. So yeah, I think for machine learning as well, I'm really interested in pushing this forward with Hop. There's such tremendous possibility, a world of possibilities.
Well, when you talk about the big machine you're working with, I would love to just see what happens when one of these models gets on there.
Oh yeah, this was not my machine.
You know what I mean? I'm just saying.
But it's quite easy to hire these machines for a few hours or for a few days. It's a big world out there, right? It's
a big cloud out there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I think what we're saying before the summer, we want to have a 1.0, something like that.
I think what we were saying is that before the summer, we'd like to have 1.0 and be an Apache top-level domain. So
there's always that as well, right?
If only one, then we have at least one. But as far as I'm concerned, those are the two main goals.
I think 1.0 is more important because we see a lot of people just wait until there's like an official release or something, a 1.0. And I think that problem will go away and more people will come on board. The top level projects just graduating from incubation, I guess, is at that point a formality because we already went through most of the pain and it was a pain.
Criteria by now. I think we Hans, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the main criteria are community building, getting the licensing issues out of the way, and having at least one release.
Correct. Those are the criteria.
So we are as good as the LP.
Well, our name still has to be validated. That's another big one.
Details.
Yeah. So there will be other things. It's like the ministry of Apache. So that things take time, but I think that 1.0 is a big one. People are just waiting for that. And say, okay, now we have a 1.0, now we can start using it. And yeah. All right. Let's call it a day for now. I wish you the best of luck with Apache Hop. Please give 0.70 a try and file each and every bug and feature request that you can think of in our Jira system, in the Apache Jira system. And
if there are any topics that you'd like to talk about yourself or hear someone else talk about for any of the next sessions that are planned, let us know.
If we don't get any proposals for sessions, we'll propose things that might interest you. Like I think we were hoping to stabilize Hop Web and give you a full tour of that. maybe talk about Apache Beam and how to run cool stuff on Spark or on Dataflow. So I've been doing a lot of testing on that, with the fat jar building, sort of stuff like that. It's a really smooth experience right now. So you can run straight from Hub GUI, your Spark job, your pipeline remotely, and see it running, stuff like that. Right? It's pretty smooth sailing right now. So those are all topics that we can talk about. We can dive into the new logging framework for workflows and pipelines, see how those things work. So we can dive into specific topics. But I would rather have these topics come from the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it doesn't all have to be. I mean, we can talk about basic workflows, basic pipelines done well. How do I test? Let's say traditional ETL, even load files into database tables, but with a testing architecture, testing setup. We can talk about these things as well. Those are equally valid.
Yeah, we have this integration testing framework, which is perfectly capable of testing your workflows and pipelines, right? So if you have a project that you want to, maybe we should do like a port, like a test set of jobs and pipelines from Kettle, and then clean them up in Hop, maybe just beef them up to the next levels, something like that. Because ultimately for companies like Vincos, we just did a deal with Neo4j, I heard, so they're very happy over there. So then you can just go to your customers and say, hey, don't worry about Kettle getting obsolete or whatever, but here's not just a migration, but a way to make your environment better, right?
Yes, even we are working right now with a client. We did it's not a POC, it's a demo with Hop. So we are working on that already. And this is, I think this will take a little bit as it takes in Mexico, but we are moving forward with that.
Yeah, there's no rush, right? There's there's nothing burning. Right? We keep pushing forward. I'm extremely happy with the support that I get from Neo4j. Like you said, we've been doing POCs. We've been actually winning deals with Hop by showing them like, hey, here's a really cool way of loading data into the graphs. If anybody's interested, I can talk a little bit about why graphs are really great for looking at execution lineage and logging for error tracking, for example. So the new perspective that you have in the Hop GUI is perfectly capable. So you can do Neo4j is an open source database, so you can install it, dump your logging in there, and it will keep track of where an error occurred and what the path was to the error in your layered workflows. You can see the logging text. You can take your Neo4j graph browser and see what the metadata was, which file was an error. So it's like a really cool thing, not just for Neo4j customers, but for a lot of people. Neo4j is going to do a lot of cool stuff for developers. They're going to hand out all sorts of free stuff in the near future. So the reason why we incorporated all the plugins into Hop was where my colleagues were using Hop more and more, and they said, well, you have support for Mongo, Cassandra, every relational database on the planet. Why not Neo4j? And I said, yeah, you're right. Let's just, I'm fine with it. Just copy it in there. So that's basically what happened right there. All the better. Anyway, yeah. Great stuff all around. No rush. Let's keep building forward. Let's keep building our future. Let's build the software that we want, right? Okay.